"Get out now, or I'm calling the cops!" my daughter screamed, on the stormiest afternoon I had ever seen in my life. Madison stood in the doorway of the house, that house she believed was hers, with a face full of fury and contempt. Her words cut through the wet air like thunderclaps. I was 61 years old, and I never imagined this moment would come. The moment when my own flesh and blood would throw me out onto the street as if I were garbage. The rain was falling with such force that the water bounced off the pavement. My clothes were flying across the front yard, soaking in the mud. A blouse I had sewn myself 20 years ago lay discarded next to the rose bushes. A dress I wore to her wedding landed in the biggest puddle. My shoes, the only decent pair I owned, were thrown against the wrought iron fence without a care. Brad, my son-in-law, was standing right next to her, filming me with his smartphone. He was laughing. Both of them were laughing. As if kicking an elderly mother out into a storm was the perfect entertainment for a boring afternoon. As if my pain were a joke. As if my 61 years of life were worth absolutely nothing. The neighbors started to come out. First, it was Mrs. Higgins, the woman from across the street, peering through her window with wide eyes. Then Mr. Henderson from number 14, standing on his porch with his arms crossed. Others cracked their doors open just a sliver, enough to watch without getting involved. Everyone was watching. Everyone knew what was happening, and nobody said a thing. Because when you are an old woman, when you have lost your voice in this society, people assume you did something wrong. They assume you were a burden, that you were a nuisance, that you deserved it. "This house is mine, Mom. Mine. You have nothing here. Nothing," Madison kept screaming from the entrance. Her voice was pure poison. Every word hit me like a stone. But I did not cry. I did not beg. I did not get on my knees as she expected. I simply started gathering my things with as much calm as I could muster, even though my hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold anything. The water ran down my neck, over my face, down my back. My clothes clung to my body. I felt the chill down to my bones. I shoved what I could into a plastic trash bag I found lying near the gate. A blouse, a pair of slacks, a sweater that was useless now because it was completely soaked. My shoes squished loudly as I walked on the saturated concrete. Brad kept filming. I heard his laugh again, that mocking laugh that would haunt my nightmares for weeks. Madison looked at him every now and then, seeking his approval, smiling when he looked back at her. They were a perfect team, united in cruelty, united in ingratitude. When I finished picking up the last item, when there was nothing left to salvage from the muddy lawn, I turned toward them. Madison was standing in the entryway with her arms crossed, chin up, looking at me as if I were a stranger, as if I hadn't spent entire nights nursing her when she had a fever, as if I hadn't worked 3 jobs to pay for her college tuition, as if I hadn't given up my own life to build hers. Then, I did something she didn't expect. I smiled. It was a small, quiet, almost sweet smile, and I said just 2 words, with a calmness I didn't even know I had inside me. "No problem?" Madison frowned. That threw her off. She expected tears. She expected drama. She expected me to fall to my knees and beg for forgiveness for existing, for being her mother, for taking up space in her precious house. But I didn't. I simply turned around and started walking in the rain, moving away from that door, from that house, from that daughter I no longer recognized. The water kept falling hard. My steps were slow but steady. I didn't look back. I didn't give them the pleasure of seeing me broken. I walked to the corner and hailed a cab. The driver looked at me strangely when he saw my state, but he didn't ask anything. He just took me to a small roadside motel about 2 miles away. A cheap one, the kind where they don't ask many questions and accept cash. I paid for 3 nights. I went up to the room. I locked the door, and only then, when I was completely alone, did I allow myself to shake. I sat on the bed and looked at my wet, wrinkled, tired hands. Hands that had worked a lifetime. Hands that built everything Madison thought was hers. Because she didn't know the truth. Nobody knew. Not Madison. Not Brad. Not even the family that adored her so much and saw me as an insignificant shadow. Everyone believed the lie that my daughter had achieved everything on her own, the lie that this house, this wealth, this bright future were the fruits of her effort. But I knew the truth. and that truth was my power. I took my phone out of my soaked purse and dialed a number I had saved months ago, a number I hoped I would never have to use, a number that represented the plan I had prepared in silence, with fear, with pain, but also with determination. They answered on the second ring. "Attorney Sarah Jenkins," said the professional voice on the other end of the line. "This is Eleanor Ross," I replied with a steady voice. "I think it is time to activate everything we prepared." There was a brief silence. Then I heard a sigh of understanding. "Are you sure, Mrs. Ross? Once we start this, there is no turning back." I looked out the motel window. The rain was still falling. I thought about Brad's laugh. I thought about Madison's screams. I thought about my clothes lying in the mud. I thought about the neighbors watching without doing a thing. I thought about all the years I sacrificed, all the times I swallowed my pride, all the humiliations I endured in silence. "I am completely sure," I said. "Do it all. Exactly as we planned. Perfect. I will file the documents with the judge tomorrow morning. In less than 72 hours, everything will be in motion." I hung up the phone and left it on the bed. Outside, the storm was beginning to settle. The sky was still dark, but the rain was less violent. I took off my wet clothes and got under the hot shower of the motel. The warm water ran over my body, washing away the mud, the cold, but not the pain. While the steam filled the bathroom, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. A few hours later, the police would knock on my daughter's door. Only they wouldn't be coming to look for me. They would be coming to arrest the criminals who invaded my house. To understand how I got to this moment, I have to go back 21 years, to the day my world collapsed completely, and I had to rebuild it with my own hands. I was 40 years old when Robert, my husband, died in a traffic accident. It was a Tuesday morning. He left early for work as always and never came back. A semi-truck hit him on the highway. He died instantly, the doctors told me, as if that made it hurt less, as if knowing he didn't suffer could fill the void he left in my life. Madison was 11 years old. She was a skinny girl, with big, frightened eyes, who cried every night asking for her daddy. I slept on the floor next to her bed, holding her hand, telling her everything would be okay. But the truth is, I didn't believe it myself. Robert was a bus driver. He earned just enough to keep us going. We didn't have significant savings. We didn't own property. We had nothing more than a small monthly rent of $500 that barely left room for food. The insurance company gave us $20,000 for his death, $20,000 for an entire life, for a husband, for a father, for the man I had loved since I was 18. Everyone told me to use that money carefully, to save it, to make it last. But I knew that $20,000 lasts nothing when you have a daughter to raise, rent to pay, groceries to buy, clothes to need. I knew that if I didn't do something different, that money would vanish in less than a year and we would be on the street. So I made a decision that would change everything. I used $5,000 to buy an industrial sewing machine and materials to work. I dedicated myself to tailoring. I worked from 5 in the morning until 11 at night, 7 days a week. I sewed school uniforms, prom dresses, did alterations, anything people would pay me for. My fingers bled from the constant work. My eyes burned from the lack of sleep. But I didn't stop. I saved the other $15,000. Every penny I earned sewing, I saved too. We lived on the bare minimum. We ate mac and cheese and hot dogs almost every day. We didn't buy new clothes. We didn't go out anywhere. Madison wore the uniforms I sewed for her myself, with leftover scraps. Everything, absolutely everything, went straight into a savings account. Robert's family criticized me. They said I was driving the girl crazy with so much poverty, that we should live better, enjoy life a little. But I knew what I was doing. I had a plan. For 3 years I lived like that, working nonstop, saving every dollar possible. Madison grew up watching her mother work until exhaustion. I explained to her 1,000 times why we lived this way. I told her I was building a future for both of us, that all this sacrifice would be worth it. She would nod, but in her eyes, I saw shame. Shame of our small apartment, shame of her mended clothes, shame of having a seamstress for a mother. When I turned 43, I had $50,000 saved. That was when I saw the opportunity. An old house in a modest neighborhood was for sale for $80,000. The owner needed to sell fast. It was in bad shape. It needed repairs. But I saw its potential. I asked for a loan of $30,000 using my sewing machine and my work history as collateral. The bank almost laughed at me, a widowed seamstress asking for a loan. But I insisted so much that they finally accepted, with sky-high interest rates. I bought that house. The first property of my life. I was 43 years old and finally owned something. I spent 6 months fixing it up myself. I learned to paint, to fix faucets, to change outlets. I hired help only for the essentials. Every dollar mattered. When I finished, I rented it out for $1,500 a month. After paying the loan mortgage, I had $600 in profit. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I kept working on the sewing. I kept saving. I kept living on the minimum. And 3 years later, I bought a second property, then a third, then a fourth. Every property I bought in bad shape, fixed it, rented it. The money from the rents I reinvested into more properties. Madison was 17 when I bought the 5th house. By then, I already had a monthly income of almost $6,000 just from rents. But we still lived in the same small apartment. We still watched every penny. Because I knew that those $6,000 were our security, our future, my daughter's education. It was at that moment that I made the decision that would change everything. The decision that today I regret with every fiber of my being. Madison had been accepted into university to study pre-law. She was brilliant, diligent, had huge dreams. But she told me something that broke my heart. She told me she was ashamed to say her mom was a seamstress, that her classmates made fun of her, that she felt less than the others. I wanted to protect her from that pain. I wanted her to feel proud. I wanted her to have what I never had. So I did something I thought was love, but turned out to be my biggest mistake. I bought a big, beautiful house in an exclusive neighborhood. It cost $400,000. I used everything I had saved as a down payment and took out a mortgage for the rest. It was a 3-story house with a large yard close to the university. A house where Madison could host her friends without shame. And here comes my biggest mistake. The mistake that would haunt me for years. I put the house in Madison's name. I thought that way she would feel secure, that she would have her own assets, that her future would be guaranteed. I told her it was her house, that I had only helped her get it, that it was her reward for being such a good student. Madison cried with happiness that day. She hugged me. She told me I was the best mother in the world. And I felt complete. I felt that all the sacrifices had been worth it. But I never told her the whole truth. I never told her that I paid the mortgage every month with the money from my rental properties. I never told her that I kept working in sewing to cover the expenses. I never told her that that house, although it was in her name, was the product of 20 years of my blood, my sweat, my tears. I let her believe she had achieved it on her own merit, that it was her natural reward for being smart. That success simply came to those who deserved it. And that lie I built out of love, turned into the monster that would devour me years later. The years in college transformed Madison into someone I no longer recognized, or maybe she was always like that and I just didn't want to see it. Maybe the monster was always there, waiting for the perfect moment to come out. At first, everything seemed normal. Madison studied law, got good grades, brought friends to the house. I kept working in my small sewing workshop that I had set up in the basement. I kept paying the mortgage, the utilities, the food, everything. But now I did it in silence, almost hidden, because Madison asked me not to tell anyone I was a seamstress. "Mom, please, when my friends come over, don't mention what you do. Say you're an investor or something," she told me one day with a pleading voice. I accepted. Because a mother always accepts when her daughter asks for something, even when that something is denying your own existence. Madison's friends would arrive at the house and see me as part of the furniture. I served them coffee, made them snacks, cleaned up after their study groups. They didn't even thank me. They simply assumed I was the help, and my daughter never corrected them. It was during her 3rd year of university when Madison met Brad. He was studying business administration at a more expensive private college nearby. He came from a family with money, or at least that's what they pretended. His father had an import business that barely functioned, but they lived as if they were millionaires. Brad was handsome, arrogant, and treated everyone with that typical disdain of someone who believes they were born superior. From the first day I saw him, I knew he was trouble. But Madison was in love, or rather, she was in love with the idea of being with someone like him. Mom, Brad comes from a very important family. His dad has incredible contacts. This could be very good for my career, she told me excitedly. I just nodded. She didn't ask for my opinion anymore. She only informed me of her decisions. Brad started staying at the house more frequently. First, he came to study. Then he stayed for dinner. Then he started spending entire weekends. He never asked for permission. He never offered to help with expenses. He simply installed himself as if the house were a 5-star hotel. And the worst of all is that he treated me as if I were the maid. He asked me to make him breakfast, to wash his clothes, to iron his shirts, and when I did, he didn't even look me in the eye to say thank you. Mrs. Ross, this shirt is ironed poorly. Can you do it again? He would tell me with that condescending tone that made me feel small. Madison never defended me. She never told him I was her mother, not her employee. She stayed silent, smiling, happy to have a boyfriend who made her feel important. One day, Brad and his family came to have dinner at the house. There were 6 people. His father, Mr. Davenport, a heavy-set man with a loud voice who talked about business deals that never worked out. His mother, Brenda, a thin and bitter woman who criticized everything with her eyes. His 2 brothers, just as arrogant as him. I prepared the entire dinner. I worked from 2 in the afternoon until 7 in the evening cooking. I made 3 different courses: dessert, special drinks. I set the table with the nicest tablecloth I had. I lit candles. Everything was perfect. When Brad's family arrived, Madison received them in the living room like the perfect hostess. Nobody introduced me. I simply appeared from the kitchen with the plates, served them, and disappeared again, like a ghost, like someone who didn't deserve to be in the same room as them. This house is beautiful, Madison. You must be very proud to have achieved all this, said Brenda, while looking around with approval. Thank you, Mrs. Davenport. I've worked very hard to have all this, my daughter replied with a radiant smile. I felt something break inside me, but I said nothing. I swallowed my words. I swallowed the pain. I went back to the kitchen and washed the dishes while they laughed in the dining room. After that dinner, Brad started bringing more people to the house. Friends, college buddies, business partners. The house became his center of operations, and I became the invisible employee who kept everything running. Madison graduated from college with honors. The ceremony was beautiful. She went up on stage, received her degree, and everyone applauded. Brad's family was there, in the front row. Robert's parents, my former in-laws, also went. But I sat all the way in the back, alone, in the last row of the auditorium, because Madison told me there weren't enough tickets for everyone and that it was better if I stayed in a discreet spot to not cause problems. After the graduation, there was a party at the house. Madison invited more than 50 people. I spent 3 days preparing everything: decorations, food, drinks, music. I spent more than $2,000 of my own money that came from the rents of my properties, from my sewing, from my silent work. During the party, a colleague of Madison's approached me in the kitchen. He was an older man, maybe 50 years old, with glasses and a kind look. "Excuse me, ma'am, are you part of the catering service?" he asked me. Before I could answer, Madison appeared out of nowhere. "Yes, she is part of the staff." "Mom, can you bring more ice, please?" She called me Mom in front of him, but in the same tone you would use to give an order to an employee. The man looked at me with pity and walked away. I went for the ice with tears in my eyes that I didn't allow myself to shed. 6 months after graduating, Madison got a job at a major law firm. She was earning $3,000 a month, a good salary for a recent graduate, but she never offered to help with the household expenses. She never asked how I was doing financially. She simply assumed everything was covered by magic. Brad also got a job, although he changed jobs every 6 months because he always had problems with his bosses. According to him, nobody recognized his talent. According to him, the world was full of incompetents who didn't know how to work. According to him, he deserved to be at the top without making an effort. But despite working, neither of them contributed a single cent to the house. I kept paying the mortgage of $2,000 a month. I kept paying the utilities that added up to another $500. I kept buying the food, the cleaning supplies, everything. They just lived. They enjoyed themselves. They spent their money on expensive clothes, fancy restaurants, weekend trips, and I watched them spend while I ate leftovers from their dinners and wore the same clothes from 10 years ago. A year later, Madison and Brad got married. It was a huge wedding, with 200 guests, in an event hall that cost $50,000. I paid for everything. I sold one of my properties to cover the costs, because Madison told me it was her special day and we couldn't look bad in front of Brad's family. On the wedding day, I was in the kitchen of the venue during the entire reception, supervising that the food came out right, that the tables were perfect, that nothing was missing. I barely danced one song with my daughter. I barely appeared in the photos, because according to the photographer, I didn't coordinate well with the color palette Madison had chosen for the official pictures. After the wedding, Brad officially moved into the house, and everything got worse. After the wedding, the house stopped being a home and turned into a silent battlefield where I always lost. Brad moved in with all his things as if he were the absolute owner. He brought his furniture, his clothes, his arrogance, and my daughter allowed it all. The rules changed overnight. I could no longer use the main living room because Brad said my TV shows were boring. My bedroom, which used to be the second largest in the house, was reassigned to become Brad's office. They moved me to the smallest room, on the 3rd floor, the one that was originally a storage closet. Mom, it's just that Brad needs a professional space to work. You understand, right? Besides, you don't need that much space. A bed and a dresser are enough, Madison told me, as if she were doing me a favor. I accepted. I always accepted, because I was afraid. Afraid that if I protested, my daughter would kick me out of her life forever. Afraid of ending up completely alone. Afraid to admit that I had raised someone incapable of loving me. But what they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I had kept something I had protected during all these years with almost obsessive care. Something that now, seeing how they treated me, began to feel like my only salvation. The documents. All the original documents were stored in a safety deposit box at the bank. The deed to the house, which although it was in Madison's name, had never been completely transferred because a final procedure was missing that only I could authorize. The contracts for the other 4 properties that kept generating rent and were completely in my name. The receipts for every mortgage payment I had made for years. The records of the bank transfers. Everything. There was something else. Something not even Madison remembered. When she turned 21, I asked her to sign a document. I told her it was a legal formality to protect the house from any tax issues. She signed without reading, trusting me. That document was a conditional occupancy agreement with very specific clauses. The main clause stated that the house was in her name, but under the condition that she treat me with respect and dignity while I lived. If at any moment there was evidence of mistreatment, verbal abuse, or unjustified expulsion, the contract would be voided and the property would automatically revert to my name. My lawyer, Sarah Jenkins, had helped me draft it years ago when I began to suspect something wasn't right. During the last 6 months, since Brad moved in officially, I had documented everything. Every insult, every humiliation, every moment of contempt, audio recordings on my phone, photos of offensive messages, short videos taken from discreet angles, a detailed journal with dates, times, witnesses. Sarah had advised me to gather solid evidence before acting. Mrs. Ross, in cases of family abuse, especially when they involve properties, we need irrefutable proof. Legal documents aren't enough. We need to demonstrate the mistreatment, she had told me, and I followed her advice to the letter. Life in that house became unbearable. Brad had taken total control of the household finances, even though it was I who paid for everything. He reviewed the bills. He questioned every expense I made. He demanded explanations about the money I spent on food. Eleanor, why did you spend $200 at the grocery store this week? That is too much. You need to learn to manage better, he told me in front of Madison, who nodded as if he were right. What they didn't know was that those $200 were mine. They came from my account, from my work, from my properties. But I didn't say anything. I just recorded every conversation on my phone that I left strategically on the kitchen table. One day, Brad organized a business meeting at the house. He invited 5 potential partners to pitch a project. He ordered me to prepare coffee and snacks for everyone. I obeyed. I prepared a beautiful tray with homemade cookies, fresh coffee, fruit. When I walked into the living room to serve them, Brad introduced me. "This is Eleanor. She lives with us. She helps us with the housework," he said without looking at me. One of the men, an older gentleman in a gray suit, looked at me confused. "Is she your housekeeper?" "Something like that," replied Brad with a smirk. "Madison has a good heart and gives shelter to people who need it." I felt the humiliation burning inside me, but I smiled, served the coffee, and went back to the kitchen. Once there, I checked my phone. The recorder had captured everything perfectly. The humiliations became public. Madison began to invite the extended family more frequently. Her aunt and uncle, my former in-laws, came to visit and filled her with praise. "Madison, this house is gorgeous. You are so successful, so smart. Your father would be so proud," my sister-in-law Karen would tell her every time she came. Nobody mentioned my name. Nobody asked about me. I simply appeared to serve the food and disappeared afterward, like a spirit, like someone who didn't really exist. But I kept documenting. I kept saving evidence. I kept meeting in secret with Sarah every 2 weeks at a coffee shop far from the house. "Mrs. Ross, this is enough to file the case. We have more than enough evidence of psychological mistreatment and emotional abuse. We can activate the contract clause right now," Sarah told me in our last meeting before the storm. "Not yet," I replied. "I need to be completely sure. I need them to show who they really are in front of more witnesses." Sarah nodded, although I saw concern in her eyes. "Just be careful. These types of situations can escalate quickly." She was right. Things escalated. 2 months before the storm, Brad called me into the living room. Madison was sitting next to him on the sofa. Both had serious expressions. "Eleanor, we need to talk," began Brad with that tone he used when he wanted to sound important. I sat across from them, hands in my lap. "Madison and I have been thinking. This house is very big and the expenses are high. We need to optimize resources," he continued. I felt a knot in my stomach. I knew where this was going. "We have decided it is time to sell one of the properties that are in your name. The rents you receive could be turned into liquid capital that we could invest better," he said, staring at me. "Which properties?" I asked, though I knew perfectly well what he referred to. "The 4 houses you rent out. We think it would be better to sell them and put that money into an investment fund that I can manage. That way everyone wins," he explained with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Those properties are my livelihood. They are my retirement," I replied with a calm voice. "Mom, don't be selfish. We are trying to help you. Brad understands finances much better than you. Trust us," Madison intervened. "I need to think about it," I said, standing up. "There isn't much to think about, Eleanor. It is best for everyone. Tomorrow we will bring the papers for you to sign," concluded Brad. That night I called Sarah and told her everything. "Under no circumstances sign anything, Mrs. Ross. This is a clear attempt at asset stripping. If you sign, you will lose everything you built for years," she warned me firmly. The next day, Brad arrived with documents, official papers, sales contracts, powers of attorney. "Everything is ready for you to sign. We just need your signature here, here, and here," he said, pointing to the lines. "I am not going to sign," I replied calmly. Brad's face changed completely. The mask of kindness fell. "What do you mean you aren't going to sign? I am not going to sell my properties. Eleanor, don't be ridiculous. Those properties are useless to you." "I'm not signing anything," I repeated with a firm voice, although inside I felt my legs shaking. Brad threw the documents onto the table violently. The noise echoed through the whole living room. Madison, who until that moment had remained quiet, stood up from the sofa with a face red with fury. "Mom, what is wrong with you? We are trying to help you, and you always cause problems," she shouted with a voice I had never heard from her before. "I don't need that help," I replied, trying to stay calm. "Of course you need it. You are an old woman who knows nothing about finance. What are you going to do with those houses? Do you think you can manage them forever? You are a mess, Mom. You always have been. My daughter's words cut through me like glass. Brad approached me with slow, intimidating steps. He stood in front of me, looking down at me with absolute contempt. Listen to me well, Eleanor. You are going to sign those papers sooner or later, because here you have no voice and no vote. This is Madison's house. These are our decisions, and you are just someone who lives here out of charity. His breath reached my face. Brad, please. I tried to step back, but my back hit the wall. Please, nothing. I am tired of your attitude, tired of you acting like you own something. You own nothing. Do you hear me? Nothing. He spat the words with hate. Madison didn't stop him. She stayed standing next to the sofa, arms crossed, watching as her husband cornered me against the wall. Her silence was worse than any insult. I managed to escape to my room. I locked the door and stayed there for hours, shaking. I took out my phone and listened to the recording I had captured. Every word was registered perfectly. Every threat, every insult. I sent the file to Sarah via text message. This is verbal abuse and intimidation. We can proceed legally whenever you decide. She responded within minutes, but I still wasn't ready. I needed the world to see who they really were. I needed witnesses. I needed them to destroy themselves in front of everyone. The following days were constant tension. Brad didn't speak to me, only looked at me with hate every time we crossed paths in the house. Madison had adopted the same attitude. They treated me as if I were invisible, except when they needed something. Eleanor, prepare dinner for 8 people. Guests are coming. Brad ordered me as if I were his employee. I obeyed, I cooked, I served, I cleaned. But my phone was always nearby, recording every interaction, every order, every slight. One afternoon, while I was cleaning the living room, I heard Madison talking on the phone on the balcony. She didn't know I was nearby. Yes, Aunt Karen, I don't know what to do with her anymore. Mom is becoming impossible. She doesn't want to cooperate with anything. Brad says, maybe we should think about taking her to a nursing home, my daughter said with a casual tone, as if she were talking about the weather. I felt the world stop. A nursing home. They wanted to get rid of me completely. No, she's not sick or anything. It's just that she doesn't fit here anymore. The house is ours. It's our space. And she is always in the way. Besides, we need that room she uses to turn it into a gym, continued Madison. I recorded every word. Every syllable of that conversation was saved on my phone. That night I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about how I had reached this point, how the baby I nursed, the girl I cared for when she had a fever, the young woman whose college I paid for, had turned into this person who planned to lock me up in a home. The next morning, Brad walked into the kitchen while I was making breakfast. He didn't greet me. He just sat down and started checking his phone. I need you to sign these papers today, he said, tossing a yellow envelope onto the table. What papers are they? I asked. A power of attorney. Madison and I need full access to all your bank accounts to help you manage your money better. Obviously, you don't know how to do it alone, he answered without looking up from his phone. I opened the envelope. Indeed, it was an extremely broad power of attorney. If I signed that, they would have total control over my entire estate, over my accounts, over my properties, over my entire life. I am not going to sign this, I said, leaving the envelope on the table. Brad looked up slowly. His eyes had a dangerous glint. Excuse me? That I am not going to sign it. He stood up so fast the chair fell backward with a crash. He walked toward me with clenched fists. For a moment I thought he would hit me, but he stopped inches from my face. You ungrateful wretch. After everything Madison has done for you, she gave you a house, a roof, food, and this is how you repay her. You are the worst kind of ingrate. His voice trembled with rage. This house isn't Madison's. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. There was a terrible silence. Brad looked at me as if I had said the biggest blasphemy in the world. What did you say? Nothing. Forget it. I tried to back away. No, no, no. Repeat what you said. He grabbed my arm tightly. You're hurting me. I tried to break free. Repeat it. He squeezed harder. Brad, let her go. Madison walked into the kitchen at that moment. He released me abruptly. I fell against the counter, hitting my hip. The pain was intense, but I didn't scream. I wasn't going to give them that pleasure. Your mother just said this house isn't yours. Can you believe it? She is completely crazy, Brad told Madison. My daughter looked at me with a mix of confusion and contempt. Mom, what are you saying? Of course this house is mine. It is in my name. Now it turns out you are making things up. I only said that. I began to explain. That nothing. I am tired of this. Tired of your dramas, of your attitude, of everything. Madison interrupted me. Maybe we should speed up the nursing home thing, suggested Brad. Maybe so. Clearly Mom is starting to have mental problems. She says things that make no sense, replied my daughter. I stayed quiet. I let them think whatever they wanted. But in my mind, I was already taking the final decision. It was enough. I couldn't take it anymore. That afternoon, while they went out to eat with friends, I called Sarah. I need you to prepare everything. I want to activate the full plan. I can't take it anymore, I told her with a firm voice. Are you completely sure, Mrs. Ross? Once we start this, there is no turning back. They are going to try to defend themselves. It is going to be a legal battle, she warned me. I am sure, more sure than ever in my life. Good. I will file the documents early tomorrow. I need you to send me all the recordings and evidence you have. Everything, said Sarah, with a professional tone. I spent the whole night transferring files. Videos, audios, photographs, scanned documents, everything I had compiled for months. Every humiliation documented, every insult recorded, every slight photographed. It was 3 a.m. when I finished sending the last file. I sat on my bed and looked around that small room they had assigned me. A room that used to be a storage closet. A room where they kept things that were no longer useful, just like me to them. But they were about to discover something. That the things they believe are useless are sometimes the most valuable, and that the old woman they despised had more power than they ever imagined. The event that would change everything forever happened 3 days later. Madison had organized a birthday dinner. Not for me, of course. My birthday had passed 2 months ago without anyone remembering. This dinner was to celebrate Brad's birthday. 35 years of mediocrity that had to be celebrated as if it were the coronation of a king. Madison invited 20 people, Brad's entire family, some college friends, colleagues from the firm where she worked. She even invited my in-laws, Karen and Elias, who arrived with expensive gifts and fake smiles. I spent 2 days preparing everything: decorations, food for 20 people, drinks, cake. I spent over $1,000 of my own money, money that came from the rents of my properties, those properties they wanted me to sell. The afternoon of the dinner, while I finished cooking, Madison came into the kitchen in an elegant dress. She looked beautiful. For a moment, I saw the little girl she was, the girl who used to hug me and tell me I was her hero. But that girl didn't exist anymore. Mom, when the guests arrive, I want you to stay in the kitchen. I don't want you walking around interrupting conversations, she told me, without looking me in the eye. I can't even say hello? I asked with a lump in my throat. It's better if you don't. People are coming to have a good time, not to deal with awkward situations, she replied, adjusting her necklace. Awkward situations? I am your mother, Madison. I know, Mom, but I also know that lately you have been weird, saying strange things. I don't want you to embarrass Brad on his birthday, she said, and left the kitchen before I could respond. I stood there, hands trembling over the sink. I breathed deep. I took out my phone and placed it in a strategic spot in the kitchen, recording. Then I put another small phone, an old one I had bought specifically for this, hidden in the living room with a full view of the dining room. The guests started to arrive. I heard their voices from the kitchen. Laughter, greetings, congratulations for Brad. I served the plates, took them to the dining room, and returned without anyone saying a word to me. It was like a ghost serving ghosts. At one point, Karen, my sister-in-law, came into the kitchen supposedly to look for more wine. Eleanor, so good to see you. You barely come out to say hello, she said with that sweet and poisonous voice she always used. Madison prefers I stay here, I replied, without turning to look at her. Ah, I understand. Well, it is her house. She makes the rules, she said, pouring herself wine. By the way, she told me you are having some little problems. You know, memory issues, age things. I turned to look at her. She was smiling smugly. I don't have any memory problems. Sure. That is what everyone says at the beginning. My mom also denied she was bad before we had to commit her. It was very sad, but necessary, she said, taking a sip of wine. Madison is doing the right thing by taking care of you. She is an exemplary daughter. She left the kitchen, leaving my blood boiling. Now I understood everything. Madison was preparing the ground with the family, making them believe I was losing my mind. That way, when they decided to lock me up somewhere, nobody would ask questions. But she didn't know that every word of that conversation had been recorded. The dinner passed between laughter and toasts. From the kitchen, I listened as everyone congratulated Brad on his success, his intelligence, his bright future. Nobody mentioned that he had changed jobs 4 times in 2 years. Nobody mentioned that Madison was the one who really paid all the bills with her salary. When it was time for the cake, Madison called me. Mom, bring the cake. I carried it carefully. It was a 3-tier cake I had spent hours decorating. I placed it in the center of the table. Everyone started singing Happy Birthday. Brad blew out the candles with a smile from ear to ear. I stood to the side, waiting to be able to go back to the kitchen. But then Mr. Davenport, Brad's father, raised his glass. I want to propose a toast to my son, to his success, to his beautiful wife, and to this magnificent house they have built together. They are the perfect example of what can be achieved with hard work and dedication, he said with a loud voice. Everyone raised their glasses. Everyone toasted. And something inside me broke definitively. They didn't build this house. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. The silence was immediate. Everyone looked at me as if I had said something obscene. Brad set his glass on the table slowly. Madison looked at me with huge eyes, red with embarrassment and fury. Mom? Shut up, she whispered through her teeth. But I didn't shut up. Something inside me had been unleashed. 20 years of silence exploding in a single moment. I built this house, with my work, with my money. After Madison's father died and left me alone with an 11-year-old girl, my voice trembled, but I didn't stop. Eleanor, that's enough, said Brad, rising from his chair. I worked 3 jobs for years. I saved every penny. I bought properties. I fixed them with my own hands. And I bought this house to give my daughter a future. All this is my work, not hers, mine. I felt the tears rolling down my cheeks, but I didn't care. Madison stood up so fast her chair fell backward. How dare you? How dare you ruin this night with your lies? She screamed, her face distorted by rage. They aren't lies. Yes, they are. This house is in my name. It is mine. I got it. I worked to have it. She kept screaming, while the guests looked at us uncomfortably. You put it in your name because I asked you to, but I paid for it. Every mortgage payment, every utility bill, everything. My voice was firmer now. Brad walked toward me with furious steps. He grabbed my arm violently. Listen to me well, you crazy old woman. You are going to go up to your room right now, and you are going to stay quiet. You have caused enough damage. He was dragging me toward the stairs. Let me go. I tried to break free. Brad, get her out of here. I don't want to see her anymore, screamed Madison. Some guests were starting to murmur. Karen stood up as if to intervene, but Elias stopped her. Mr. Davenport watched the scene with a cruel smile, enjoying the show. Brad dragged me to the front door. He opened the door with a bang. Outside it had started to rain. A storm was approaching. The sky was dark and the wind blew hard. Get out now or I'm calling the cops, screamed Madison from the dining room. Madison, please, I begged. I want you gone. I don't want to see you here anymore. This house is mine. Do you understand? Mine. You have nothing. Nothing. Her voice was pure hysteria. Brad ran up to my room. I heard noises, drawers opening, things being thrown. He came down with my few belongings in his arms, my clothes, my shoes, some personal items. He threw everything out the door into the yard, where the rain was starting to fall harder. No, please, it's raining, I screamed. But he didn't stop. He kept going up and down. emptying my entire room. Every piece of clothing ended up in the mud. My shoes, my sweaters, the few photographs I kept. Everything being destroyed under the rain that was now falling with violence. The neighbors started to come out. Mrs. Higgins, the lady from across the street, was at her window with her hands over her mouth. Mr. Henderson, from number 14, was recording everything with his phone from his porch. Other neighbors opened their doors, looked, but nobody did anything. The dinner guests came out too, drawn by the scandal. They stayed on the porch, under the roof, watching as I was expelled into the storm like trash. I started picking up my soaked things. My hands shook from the cold and shock. The rain soaked me to the bone. My clothes clung to my body. I could barely see through the water running down my face. Brad took out his phone and started filming me. He was laughing, that cruel, mocking, inhumane laugh. Brad's laugh resonated over the sound of the rain. He filmed me while I picked my belongings out of the mud, as if my humiliation were the best entertainment in the world. The guests remained on the porch, some with wine glasses still in their hands, watching the spectacle without doing anything. "Look at the crazy woman. She says the house is hers," yelled Brad toward the guests, provoking some nervous laughter. Madison stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, face hard as stone. There wasn't a shred of doubt in her eyes. There was no remorse, only pure contempt. I managed to stuff what I could into 2 plastic bags I found near the gate. Most of my clothes were ruined. The water kept falling with such force I could barely keep my eyes open. My shoes squelched in the mud puddles. When I finished picking up the last thing, I turned toward the house one more time. Toward that house I had bought with 20 years of work. Toward my daughter who looked at me as if I were an undesirable stranger. Toward all those witnesses who would never forget this night. And then I did the same thing I had done 3 days ago. I smiled. A quiet, serene, almost sweet smile. "No problem," I said with a clear voice despite the rain. Madison frowned. She didn't expect that reaction. She expected tears. She expected me to collapse, to beg. But I simply took my bags and started walking under the storm. "And don't come back," screamed Brad behind me. "This house is Madison's. It always was. You are nobody here." I didn't turn back. I didn't respond. I simply kept walking to the corner where I hailed the same cab from the previous time. The driver recognized me. "Ma'am, again?" "What is happening?" he asked with genuine concern. "Just take me to the motel, please," I replied with a tired voice. During the ride, I took out my phone. I had several messages from Sarah. She had seen the news about the storm and was worried. I wrote her a simple message. "Activate it all. Now." Her response arrived in seconds. "Understood. The documents are already filed with the judge. The order should be ready tomorrow morning. Are you okay?" "I will be okay when this is over," I replied. I arrived at the motel soaked, shaking, exhausted. The receptionist looked at me with pity, but asked no questions. I went up to the room and dropped the wet bags on the floor. I took off the soaked clothes and got under the hot shower. The warm water ran over my body while I processed what had just happened. The public humiliation, the laughter, the witnesses. Everything had been recorded not just by Brad, but also by Mr. Henderson and probably other neighbors. My humiliation was documented forever, but they didn't know that was exactly what I needed. Witnesses, public evidence, irrefutable proof of mistreatment. Now it wasn't just my word against theirs. Now the whole world had seen who they really were. I got out of the shower and checked my phone. The 2 devices I had left recording in the house had captured everything. Every insult, every scream, the violence with which Brad dragged me. Madison's words. Everything was there. In high-quality video, I sent all the files to Sarah. She called me immediately. "Mrs. Ross, this is legal gold. With these recordings, plus the testimonies of the neighbors who witnessed everything, plus the occupancy agreement Madison signed, plus the original property documents, the case is absolutely solid." Her voice sounded excited, professional. "How long will it take?" I asked. "The judge already reviewed the preliminary documents this afternoon. He is outraged. He told me he is going to issue the order tonight. Tomorrow, first thing, the police will go to the house with the temporary eviction order and notification of property fraud," she explained. "Property fraud?" "Yes. Madison has been living in a property that legally remains under her control through the occupancy agreement. That contract clearly specified that the condition for her to maintain use of the property was to treat you with respect and dignity. She violated that contract flagrantly and publicly. Furthermore, the attempt to make you sign powers of attorney under duress constitutes attempted asset stripping. These are serious crimes. Sarah's voice was firm. I felt something loosen in my chest. After so many years of enduring, after so much silent pain, finally someone was defending me. Someone was fighting for me. And the other properties? I asked. Those are completely in your name and always have been. Nobody can touch them. In fact, the income from those properties demonstrates that you have been financially independent this whole time. That strengthens the case even more, she answered. What will happen tomorrow exactly? The police will arrive with a court order. They will notify Madison and Brad that they must vacate the property temporarily while the case is resolved. They will be informed that there is an open investigation for elder abuse and attempted property fraud. The original property documents will be presented, and the truth will come to light in front of everyone who was present tonight, explained Sarah, with satisfaction in her voice. Can I be there? Not only can you must be there. You are the complainant and the legitimate owner. The police will escort you back to your house. To your house, Mrs. Ross, because that is what it is. Your house. Sarah's words made me cry. I cried for hours that night. I cried for the lost years, for the daughter I thought I had and who never really existed, for the love I gave without receiving anything in return, for all the times I swallowed my pride and accepted crumbs. But I also cried of relief, because finally, after so much time being invisible, someone saw me, someone recognized my pain, someone defended me. At 6 a.m, my phone rang. It was Sarah. The order is ready. The police will pick you up at the motel at 9 o'clock sharp. Get ready, Mrs. Ross. Today your new life begins, she said. I got up, showered, put on the best clothes I had managed to save from the storm. I looked in the mirror. I was 61. Wrinkles around the eyes, gray in my hair, hands marked by years of work. But for the first time in a long time, I saw myself really. I saw a strong woman, a survivor, a fighter. At 9 o'clock exactly, 2 patrol cars parked in front of the motel. I went down with my small bag. Sarah was there too, with her briefcase full of documents. She hugged me. Ready? She asked. More than ready, I replied. The ride to the house was silent. I looked out the window, watching the streets I knew so well go by. The streets where I had worked for years, where I had built my life, where I had raised my daughter. When we arrived at the house, there were already several neighbors outside. The news of what had happened the night before had spread. Mrs. Higgins was in her garden, pretending to water the plants but clearly waiting to see what would happen. Mr. Henderson was on his porch with his coffee, watching. Other neighbors were peeking through windows. The police got out first. There were 4 officers, 2 men, 2 women, all with serious expressions. The senior officer, a man of about 50 with gray hair, approached me. Mrs. Eleanor Ross? He asked with respect. Yes, that's me, I replied. We have a temporary eviction order and notification of investigation. We are ready to proceed. I looked toward the house. The living room curtains moved slightly. I knew Madison and Brad were inside. They had probably seen the patrol cars. They were probably terrified, wondering what was happening. I am ready, I said with a firm voice. The 4 officers walked toward the front door. Sarah and I followed them. The officer knocked on the door loudly. Police! Open the door. There was silence for a few seconds. Then we heard hurried footsteps. The door opened. Brad appeared disheveled, in pajamas, looking like he hadn't slept well. What? What's going on, officers? He stammered. Brad Davenport? Asked the officer. Yes. And Madison Ross? She's inside. What is happening? We have a court order. Allow us to enter, said the officer, pushing the door gently but with authority. They entered. I entered behind them. Madison was on the stairs, also in pajamas, face pale. When she saw me, her eyes went huge. Mom? What are you doing here? What is all this? Madison's voice sounded high, nervous, almost childish. I didn't answer. I let the officer speak. I let the law do its work. The senior officer took some documents out of a manila envelope and began to read with a clear and authoritative voice. Madison Ross and Brad Davenport, we have a court order issued by Judge Marcus of the Civil Court. You are notified that there is an open investigation against you for elder abuse, attempted asset stripping, and violation of occupancy agreement. The officer's voice resonated through the whole house. What? No, there has to be a mistake. Brad tried to approach, but another officer stopped him with a gesture. There is no mistake. This property, located at 243 Pine Avenue, is registered under an occupancy agreement in the name of Madison Ross, but with specific clauses of conditional use. The legal owner and original title holder is Mrs. Eleanor Ross, continued the officer. Madison grabbed the stair railing. Her face went from pale to deep red. That cannot be. This house is mine. It is in my name. I have the papers. Her voice was starting to crack. Sarah took a step forward, opened her briefcase, and took out several documents. You have papers for a conditional occupancy agreement you signed 7 years ago. A contract that allowed you to live in this property under specific conditions of respect and dignity toward Mrs. Eleanor Ross. You violated that contract flagrantly and publicly. We have video evidence of the violent expulsion you and your husband executed last night during the storm. Sarah's voice was professional, cold, devastating. That is a lie. She was causing problems. She was saying crazy things in front of our guests, screamed Brad. Crazy things? Speaking the truth is crazy? Asked Sarah, taking out more documents. We have the bank records for the last 20 years. Every mortgage payment on this house was made by Mrs. Eleanor Ross from her personal account. Every utility, every repair, every expense, all paid by her. No, that cannot be. Madison came down the stairs, stumbling. I paid my share. I worked. You worked, yes, but you spent your salary on yourself. On your clothes, your trips, your restaurants. You never contributed a single cent to this house. Sarah placed bank statements on the living room table. Here are the proofs. 20 years of bank transfers from Mrs. Eleanor Ross's accounts. Brad approached the table and started reviewing the documents with shaking hands. I could see how his face changed as he read. Arrogance turned into confusion. Confusion into shock. Shock into panic. Furthermore, continued the officer, we have multiple audio and video recordings where you two threaten, insult, and coerce Mrs. Ross to sign transfer documents for her other properties. That constitutes attempted property fraud. Recordings? What recordings? Asked Madison with a weak voice. Sarah took out her tablet and played one of the videos. It was the scene in the kitchen where Brad cornered me against the wall, screaming at me that I owned nothing. The audio was perfectly clear. Listen to me well, Eleanor. You are going to sign those papers sooner or later, because here you have no voice and no vote. This is Madison's house. These are our decisions, and you are just someone who lives here out of charity. Brad's voice coming out of the tablet sounded even more cruel and ruthless. Madison put her hands to her mouth. Tears started rolling down her cheeks. We have 17 similar recordings, said Sarah, turning off the video, all with threats, coercion, and insults. And we have the video from last night, filmed by multiple witnesses, where you expelled Mrs. Ross into a storm, throwing her belongings into the mud, laughing at her suffering. By that moment, more neighbors had approached the open door. Mrs. Higgins was there, hands on her chest. Mr. Henderson, too. Mrs. Lydia from number 20. 5 or 6 other neighbors, all listening, all seeing the truth come to light. Therefore, continued the senior officer, you are ordered to vacate this property temporarily while the legal investigation develops. You have 2 hours to gather your essential belongings. The rest of your things will remain on the property under custody until the judge determines the final resolution. You can't do this. This is my house, screamed Madison hysterically. I live here. I grew up here. This house legally belongs to Mrs. Eleanor Ross, replied the officer firmly. You lived here under a conditional permit that you violated. Now, you must leave. Brad exploded. His face turned red with fury. This is absurd. It is a conspiracy. This manipulative old woman set a trap for us. He pointed at me with his finger. I took a step forward. It was the first time I spoke since entering the house. It wasn't a trap, Brad. It was justice. For years, you humiliated me, despised me, treated me like garbage. You assumed that because I was old, because I was quiet, because I loved you, I was stupid. But I wasn't. I was just documenting every single one of your abuses, waiting for the right moment. My voice was quiet but firm. "How could you do this to us?" sobbed Madison. "I am your daughter, and you are my mother." I responded, feeling something break inside me. "But you treated me worse than an employee. You made me invisible. You denied my existence in front of your friends. You tried to steal what I built with 20 years of work. You threw me onto the street in a storm. And you asked me how I could do this to you?" Tears ran down my face, but my voice didn't shake. "I gave you everything. My youth, my strength, my entire life. I worked until I bled so you could have a future. And you paid me with contempt." "But I didn't know," Madison tried to say. "You didn't know because you never asked. You never cared to know. You assumed everything you had was by your own merit, that your success was yours alone, that I was just a nuisance you endured out of pity." I interrupted her. The silence in the room was absolute. The officers looked at us with expressions mixing professionalism with humanity. The neighbors in the doorway didn't dare breathe loudly. "You have 2 hours," repeated the officer. "Gather your things and leave. If you do not do so voluntarily, we will proceed to escort you by force." Brad tried to protest one more time, but another officer took him by the arm firmly. "Sir, I suggest you cooperate. You already have enough charges against you. Do not add resisting authority." Madison ran up the stairs, sobbing. Brad followed her, shooting looks of pure hate at me. We heard them on the second floor, opening drawers, throwing things, arguing with each other. Sarah approached me and put her hand on my shoulder. "It is okay, Mrs. Ross." I nodded, although I was shaking from head to toe. It wasn't easy. None of this was easy. But it was necessary. The neighbors started to enter, little by little. Mrs. Higgins approached me with tears in her eyes. "Mrs. Ross, I didn't know. If I had known the truth, I would have done something. What they did to you last night was terrible." "We all saw it," she said, taking my hand. Mr. Henderson also approached. "I have the full video from last night. If you need it for the case, I can give it to you. What they did to you is unspeakable." One by one, the neighbors introduced themselves. They offered testimonies. They offered support. They offered apologies for not intervening sooner. The community that had been a silent witness to my humiliation was now becoming my support network. 40 minutes later, Madison and Brad came down with 4 large suitcases. Their faces were swollen from crying. Brad remained furious, but defeated. Madison couldn't even look me in the eye. When they reached the door, Madison stopped. She turned toward me. For a moment I saw a flash of the little girl she was. "Mom, she began to say. "No," I interrupted her. "You have nothing to say to me now. You had years to tell me you loved me, years to treat me with respect, years to thank me for what I did for you. You chose not to. You chose to humiliate me. Now live with that choice." Madison left the house crying. Brad followed her, dragging the suitcases with contained fury. The neighbors watched them leave in silence. Nobody offered them help. Nobody showed them sympathy. The truth had come out, and now everyone knew who they really were. When the patrol cars left and the house was finally empty, I stood in the middle of the living room. My house. The place I had built with 20 years of sacrifice and almost lost due to misunderstood love. Sarah stayed with me that afternoon, helping me process everything. She explained the next legal steps, the deadlines, the hearings, but she also sat with me on the sofa and simply let me cry. Because even though I had won, even though I had recovered my dignity, the pain was still there, the pain of knowing my own daughter had betrayed me in the cruelest way possible. 3 days later, Madison tried to call me. I didn't answer. She sent me messages. I deleted them without reading. Brad tried to approach the house, but the security officer I had hired kept him away. They were desperate. They had lost everything in a matter of hours. A week later, I received a call from Karen, my sister-in-law. Her voice sounded different, humble, regretful. "Eleanor, I need to ask for your forgiveness. Madison lied to all of us. She made us believe you were losing your mind, that the house was hers, that you lived off her charity. We didn't know the truth. If we had known. She sobbed on the other end of the line. Would you have done anything differently? I asked with a tired voice. There was a long silence. I don't know. But I should have asked. I should have investigated. I am sorry, she replied. I accepted her apologies. But I didn't forget. The damage was done. The family that should have protected me had abandoned me because it was easier to believe the successful young woman than the invisible old one. 2 weeks later, the court hearing took place. Judge Marcus reviewed all the evidence. The videos, the recordings, the financial documents, the neighbor testimonies. His verdict was clear and forceful. The house returned completely to my name. The occupancy agreement was voided due to violation of its clauses. Madison and Brad had to pay a settlement of $50,000 for emotional damages and mistreatment. Furthermore, they were prohibited from approaching me for 2 years. But the most important thing, what really changed everything, was what the judge said at the end of the hearing. This case represents one of the most painful injustices I have seen in my career. A mother who sacrificed her entire life for her daughter, only to be discarded like trash when she was no longer convenient. Mrs. Eleanor Ross not only has the right to recover her property, she has the right to recover her dignity. And this court returns it to her officially today. His words resonated in the entire room. Madison didn't attend the hearing. She sent a lawyer who tried to negotiate, but there was nothing to negotiate. The facts were irrefutable. Brad was present, sitting at the back of the room, face composed. When the judge read the verdict, he ran out without saying a word. After the hearing, Sarah and I went to a small cafe near the courthouse. We ordered hot tea and sat by the window. "What do you plan to do now, Mrs. Ross?" she asked me. I had thought a lot about that question over the last few weeks. I had spent entire nights awake, reflecting on my life, on the decisions I made, on the future I had left. "I am going to do something good with all this," I replied finally. And that was exactly what I did. Using the money from the rents of my properties, plus the settlement Madison and Brad had to pay me, I created a project that had been gestating in my mind for years. A foundation for older women in vulnerable situations. I converted 2 of my properties into temporary homes for women over 60 who had been abandoned or mistreated by their families. I offered them shelter, food, legal support, and above all, dignity. A place where they could rebuild themselves without being judged, without being invisible. The first woman to arrive was Brenda, a 67-year-old lady who had been kicked out by her son after selling her house to pay for his college. Her story was painfully similar to mine. She cried for hours the day she arrived. She couldn't believe someone was helping her without asking for anything in return. "Why are you doing this for me?" she asked through tears. "Because I know what it feels like to be invisible. And nobody deserves to feel that way," I replied, hugging her. In 6 months, I had helped 12 women, each with her own story of family betrayal, abuse, abandonment, each seeking to recover the dignity that had been stolen from them. And I was there to help them. Because finally, I had found my purpose. The big house, the one that had caused so much pain, I kept. But I didn't live alone in it anymore. I hired Mrs. Higgins, my neighbor, as project manager. Mr. Henderson volunteered to do repairs. Other neighbors donated food, clothes, time. The community that had witnessed my humiliation was now part of my redemption. Madison tried to contact me several times during that first year. Long letters asking for forgiveness, voicemails crying. She even tried to show up at the house once, but the security officer I had hired didn't let her in. Brad, on the other hand, disappeared. According to what I heard, they divorced 3 months after the trial. She blamed him for everything. He blamed her. The truth is, both were equally responsible. One day, exactly 1 year after that storm, I received a certified letter. It was from Madison. I didn't open it immediately. I left it on the table for 2 days, looking at it, wondering if I wanted to know what it said. Finally, I opened it. It was different from the other letters. There were no pleas or excuses, only honest and painful words. "Mom, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know what I did to you has no justification. I have spent this year in therapy, trying to understand how I became the person I was. How could I be so cruel to the woman who gave me everything? I don't have an answer. I only know I was so obsessed with appearing successful, with proving to the world I was important, that I lost sight of what really mattered. I lost sight of love. I lost sight of gratitude. I lost you. I am not asking you to forgive me. I am not asking you to let me back into your life. I just want you to know that finally I understood. I understood that everything I am, everything I have, everything I achieved was thanks to you, and I destroyed that out of pride and stupidity. I hope one day I can be half the woman you are. I love you, even if I no longer have the right to tell you. Madison. I read the letter 3 times. I cried with every reading, because despite everything, despite the pain and betrayal, she was still my daughter, and a mother's love isn't erased, even if it breaks, even if it hurts, even if everything seems lost. I didn't answer the letter. Not yet. Maybe one day, maybe when time has healed the deepest wounds, maybe when I can look at her without feeling the pain of that night under the storm. But that day hadn't arrived yet. Meanwhile, I continued with my life, with my project, with my purpose. Every woman I helped was a small victory against injustice. Every smile I managed to get from them was proof that dignity can be recovered, that it is never too late to defend yourself, that being old doesn't mean being useless or invisible. On my 62nd birthday, the 12 women of the project organized a surprise party for me. They decorated the house with flowers, cooked my favorite food, sang happy birthday to me. Brenda gave me a painting she had done. It was a portrait of me, but not as I saw myself in the mirror. She painted me as she saw me. Strong, dignified, beautiful. You saved us all, she said with tears in her eyes. You gave us back our lives. No, I replied, hugging her. You saved me. You showed me that there is still kindness in this world, that it is still worth fighting. That night, alone in my room, I looked out the window toward the garden where once my clothes were thrown in the mud, where once I was humiliated in front of everyone. That garden was now full of flowers that Brenda and the other women had planted, flowers growing where before there was only pain. And I understood something important. Sometimes life tears everything away to teach you who you really are. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find your true value. Sometimes the most violent storm is necessary to clear the path toward your true life. I was Eleanor Ross. I was 62 years old. I was a mother, even if my daughter had betrayed me. I was a strong woman, even if the world tried to make me feel weak. I was a homeowner, investor, fighter, survivor, but above all, I was dignified. And that dignity nobody, absolutely nobody, could ever take away from me again. If you are reading this and feel invisible, if your family despises you, if they believe that because you are older you are worth nothing, I want you to know something. You have power, more power than you think. Don't let anyone take away your dignity. Don't let anyone make you feel you don't deserve respect, because you deserve it. You deserve everything. And if you need help, seek it. Document the abuse. Keep the evidence. Find people who will defend you. Justice exists. Dignity can be recovered. And never, never is it too late to defend what is yours. This is my story. The story of how my daughter threw my clothes into the rain until she discovered that the house was actually never hers. It was mine. It was always mine. And now, finally, the whole world knows.